As we all know, Kengan Omega has turned into a much more story-driven manga than Kengan Ashura. The story about the worm has been in full swing ever since the end of the KVP tournament, and we've already found out who the leader of the worm is, one of the connectors, and a strong hint as to who the other one is. The power skill has been broken over and over again by this point, and it's gotten people wondering, who is the final boss? What's the endgame with all of this? And that's what we're here to discuss today. I made a list of all the candidates and potential final bosses from unlikely but worth a shout to the most likely, and also who I think should be the final boss. We'll also be discussing the potential scenario of the final fights, and how I would like to see them unfold for some of these picks. It's a bit of a fantasy booking video if you will. Starting with the very unlikely, Tetsuyoshi Katsuya. Tetsuyoshi Katsuya is a character from the prequel to Kengan Ashura called Fist of the Seeker, written and also drawn by Sandrovich himself. For this video, I don't find it necessary to get all that deep into Fist of the Seeker lore, but from the somewhat vague statements from the manga, Katsuya can take hits from Samato, who's more or less equal to Omega Rayen. And Katsuya has been generally stated to be a Kuroki level fighter with Julius's physical strength. Do I see him ever appearing in Omega? Probably no, because Sega, while canon, is almost just a prototype for Kengan, and I don't think these guys will ever actually show up in the story, so let's move on. Shaji. Shaji has been a prominent villain from the worm since the end of Ashura, and not to mention he's also the brother of the head of the worm Yan. Faye, Edward, and Sha were the original evil trio, and what Sandrovich has been doing with Sha is obvious, a sleazy cowardly villain with great latent potential for power that keeps escaping certain death. He's already outlived both Edward and Faye, even though he's inferior to them in every sense of the word. Surprisingly, he's one of the more interesting villains in Omega. His aura as a real threat has been ruined of course, but so many of the serious villains in Kengan have amounted to very little to nothing, so I don't mind Shaji being a different kind of antagonist. His dragon that should have been born a red storyline will undoubtedly see some payoff very soon. But do I think he'll be the final boss? No. But I think he'll be a huge factor in one of the final fights. Keep this in mind for later. Gilbert Woo. And with this, we're entering the more likely territory. Gilbert Woo is the son and a clone of Edward Woo and is the current leader of the Westward faction. He is considered to be marginally superior to Edward and has already beaten Rayen once, off-screen that is. Do I think Gilbert will be the final boss? Partly. I think he's without a doubt the final boss for Rayen. He has to be. Rayen is undergoing some serious training after his loss to Gilbert, and a rematch is imminent. The way I would like to see everything unfold is Gilbert to have some depth. It would be a waste to create a clone of Edward and get the exact same thing and see him fight Rayen and just die. I want to see something different, and I think the key to fleshing out Gilbert is through Willem, because I believe him being the only surviving friend of Gilbert carries some deeper meaning. Willem is only loyal to Gilbert, and he's been shown bearing a confrontational attitude towards several worm members. I would love to see Willem going against Gilbert as he turns to Edward more and more, and Willem being concerned for his friend like the symbiote Spider-Man story. There is a lot of potential for really fun drama between the two characters. This could factor into the Rayen and Gilbert fight in a 2v1 manner or even a triple threat. And imagine that after Gilbert dies, Rayen spares Willem because he knows what it's like to lose a loved one to Edward Woo's doing, and we would get this mature toned-down Rayen that people expected after Ariel's death. Willem could join the Kure clan or go solo and start a new life. Is it kind of corny? Perhaps, but that's the point of manga storytelling. It's supposed to be dramatic. And with that being said, I don't think Gilbert will be the final boss, but I can definitely see him being one of them. Shyen. Shyen is none other than the leader of the worm. We know very little about Shyen other than the fact that he's the head of the worm and that he's Shaji's brother, but he can assume to be at the very least reasonably strong since he's the leader of the entire worm. Shyen is a tricky pick for me. I don't know what he's gonna bring to the table in the story, especially with Shen being established as the fighter among the worm top brass. If I were to guess, his story is with Shaji. I wouldn't mind Shaji kind of becoming the unlikely underdog and turning against the worm, in not a huge redemption arc way, but just more of a I'm taking control of my life kind of way, and divulges some huge weakness of the worm to the Kengan Association, and that's how Yan gets dealt with. Because if you ask me, the fact that Shaji has potential to be actually strong, and that it's just his mentality that is blocking his greatness, means that the payoff with all of this should be the moment when he finally does man up and takes control of things. One thing for certain though is, I don't want any of these guys being straight up beaten clean by the protagonist, these guys being Yan and the worm. I think I speak for everyone when I say we've had enough of that. I would like to see Sandro take advantage of these character dynamics and outside factors that can influence the outcome of a fight and make strategy become a bigger part of these fights. Characters really outsmarting each other and having to bank on one counter, barely surviving even though they won, and stuff like that, rather than just character A somehow brutally overcoming character B. Tournament fights and warm fights should carry a different tone in my opinion, and this is a good way to showcase that. So is Yan the final boss of Kengan? Like I mentioned before, I think his story is more with Shaji than any of the protagonists, but he's the head of the worm, so I'll give it a maybe. Shen Lan. Shen Lan is the clone of the connector. His full identity was revealed as recently as this past Wednesday. He is assumed to be almost connector, whereas Shen Wuon is the connector of Gao Ryugi. I'm gonna be honest, I have zero idea what Lohan's role in the story is. He is currently in a direct confrontation with the Kengan Association, one of the most well put together Omega chapters by the way. Credit where it's due, Sandrovich killed it with this one. More about him might be known by the time this video is out if this isn't out until the next Wednesday, so for the time being, allow me to skip over this one. Shen Wuon. Shen Wuon is one of the worm leaders on this list that we actually have some material to work with. He is by far the strongest we've ever seen fight in all of Ashura and Omega, and he made light work of Gao Mugaku, who Oma of all people was visibly struggling against. He's been as much of a comedy character as he is an omnipotent final boss, and we still don't know what his goal is, but it's very safe to assume that he'll be at least the second or third final boss. The way I see it, Shen Wuon is Kogan Ryugi's final boss, as absurd as the power level difference may be, and Oma's final boss is, wait for it, for Shen Wuon, I would love to see a Broly vs Z Fighters kind of boss fight, with all the S-tier fighters with the exception of Kano and Oma having to jump him and using everything they got to weaken him, and some actually dying in the process. Koga and Ryugi would take on a final weakened Shen, and here's another plot twist. Before the battle with the S-tiers, I would love to see Tokita Nigo 6, Tiger Nigo somehow usurping Shen Wuon and snaking the wormheads in the final arc for his own gain. Maybe it's some technology that he found, maybe it's some sneak attack. This betrayal and surprise wound inflicted on Shen by Niko can serve as a plot device for Shen to hurry up and come looking for Gao Ryugi frantically. Since Shen is Gao's connector, maybe he needs Gao to heal himself, something like that. The only explanation that I could come up with for Shen not hurrying up and capturing Gao right now is because Shen doesn't feel threatened by anyone, and that's the slip up that Tiger Nigo should aim for. If a weakened Shen still beats most of the S tiers and only lose to some special ability that Gao found due to their connection, I think that's one way to write Shen's defeat without contradicting his own established feats. Does this make the heroes look kind of pathetic? I mean yeah, but it's Sandrovich that started adding DBZ level characters, and there's no choice. The only alternative is for Koga to become a DBZ level character himself, which at that point you might as well just cancel the manga. So do I think Shen is the final boss? A strong maybe to a full yes. But our last pick is Tokita Nigo 6, Tiger Nigo, however you want to call him. To me this one is a no-brainer. Tokita Nigo 6 should be the definitive final boss of Kengan. Out of everyone on this list, he's the most naturally developed villain with actual screen time that we got to see. We've seen the horrible acts that he's committed, the pain that he has caused both Oma and Akito, or even Fei and Lutien. Again, like with most Omega villains, we don't know for sure what his goals are, but creating some sort of all-powerful, perfect martial art might be one of them. And considering how absurdly powerful the worm leaders are, I feel like the downfall of the worm should come with internal conflict, with Willem, with Sha, with Yan, and amidst this chaos, Nigo 6 being the guy to take advantage of all of this and remaining as the one true final boss over the remnants of the worm. And in my opinion, the one true final fight of all of Kengan, not just Omega, but also for the third series if there is one, should be Oma and Akito versus the other Tokita Nigo. Showcase the other fan favorites in the 1 vs many fight against Shen. This final fight, the raid style 2v1 with story, with emotion and callbacks. I don't want to see any immortal Chinese clone dragons, any government forces, even if just for one fight. Let's go back to the true essence of Kengan. Try to picture this. In the final finishing moments, I want to see Oma and his Niko having a father-son Kamehameha moment. Of course, Oma's Niko can be there physically, but you know what I'm getting at. And imagine something like Niko in his final moments getting dragged down by the souls and visions of the Ghoul Ritual victims. Akito and Oma should also be pushed to their very limits, and it should end with a satisfying definitive beatdown to wrap up everything. To me, that's how things should go down. So is Tokita Nigo 6 the final boss of all of Kengan? To me, yes. This guy has a wicked design, and his history is very deeply linked with two of our fan favorites. And Sandrovich has really gone out of his way to stress multiple times that this guy is evil. Something that he hasn't done for Shen or any of the other Worm guys. Tok Nigo should 100% double cross the Worm and claim his position as the secret final boss. Is only right. So that's my video on the final boss of all of Kengan. Let me know if you guys agree with the picks, or if you have any scenarios of your own. As always, it's Edward Takeshi, thanks for watching, and peace.